Hello to everyone joining us today to celebrate the life of our dear friend and colleague, Bill McLennan. I am Moya Waters and I am the Associate Director of MOA. I will be co-hosting this event with my colleague and friend, Cathryn Duffek, who is MOA's Curator of Visual Arts and Pacific Northwest. Cathryn and I were anthropology students in the late 1970s and worked with Bill for over 40 years. Before we begin, I want to let participants know that this event is being recorded and will be posted on MOA's YouTube channel for people to watch at a later date. The chat function will also be available for people to add personal comments during the event. As MOA and the university are situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people, we have asked Elder Larry Grant to welcome you to this event and to speak about his relationship with Bill.
Siem to see it, tena tlomok kushwe ayslak konesquich, tenitin at Musqueam. Clark says Yawinner, Kayapalano, Kus Hiloktok, the Huinas, Emignetten, Kushwe to all some of Musqueam. The Ekmanis Yawinner, Kayapalano, set to something neat to swallow. Hilokta, Theatala, to swallow up namen. When I ate in the squallow, because I think Hiloktala, because we eat, have, because Shaya, Bill, because when I ate the squallow, because I want to say thank you very much for having me to do a welcome to our respected friends and relatives that are here today, going to be able to see this. I'm Larry Grant from the Musqueam community that has close ties to the Museum of Anthropology and very close ties to Bill. And I just want to say thank you and welcome as our ancestors, Kayapalanoch and Holtimotuch had done when the first visitors arrived to our lands here on the traditional lands of the Musqueam people. Our history with Bill goes back a long ways, and there are some really, really outstanding moments that we have. And one of the best ones, I think, was when Bill was assisting in doing the exhibit at the Museum of Man at, I call it Hull, Quebec, at that time. He had been to Musqueam in assisting our community in recreating the Coast Salish house that stands today in Ottawa. And that's a very monumental moment of things. And he'd always been a very close compatriot of Musqueam, working together, identifying belongings, getting us to identify belongings, showing us new things that were found, and sometimes from the different collectors around the world, bringing all of this presence back to us. And also being included when the Spirit Wrestler Gallery had these shows and connection to the Maori people that really connected our family to the New Zealanders by having our grandson named Manawa by Derek Lardelli from Gisborne, New Zealand. So I just want to say thank you for all the moments that I had with Bill, and being enlightened by Bill with all of these developments in the archaeological world, and it really helps with our ethnographical research and our language programs. I just wanted to say those few words in regards to Bill and his family. I raised my hand and thanked. It's been my privilege to know Bill and work beside him a little bit. It's really a great pleasure and privilege to have been part of his world. So I say thank you for that. Thank you, thank you. Hi, Tepka. Thank you.
I have been at MOA since 1979, first as a student and as a staff member since 1980. I began my career at MOA as a collections intern, and one of my jobs was to take accession photographs of the backlog of objects for collection records. As Bill was MOA's photographer and graphic designer at that time, he taught me photography. I would set up the Nikon on the photo stand with our grayscale background, adjust lights and take photos of each object day in and day out. Sometimes I got to use Bill's prized Hasselblad for special setups. We also spent many hours developing film and printing photos in the darkroom, bringing images to life in chemical baths and under red light. Over time, I also picked up some graphic design skills, and we worked on calendars, invitations, and posters. I learned so much from Bill in those early years and was so lucky to have learned from the pro. After I moved upstairs to administration, Bill and I continued to work together on numerous projects and initiatives, many of which you will hear about today. Bill studied arts and merchandising at Vancouver City College, where he learned graphic design and photography. His early jobs were at the Vancouver Centennial Museum and H.R. Macmillan Planetarium, where he worked as a graphic and production designer and photographer. In 1976, he came to work at MOA to produce exhibitions and design brochures, publications, marketing, and other printed materials. Bill also taught and trained students and interns and started researching photographs of the Northwest Coast objects. This led him to experimenting with infrared photography to reveal hidden images obscured over time, which became his passion and perhaps even an obsession. In 1995, the museum allowed Bill to take a leave to work for Expo 86, where he served as registrar to purchase and arrange loans of objects and artifacts for a number of exhibitions on site. He also supervised and designed the construction of the Pakistan Pavilion and worked on a number of exhibits and publications that MOA produced during that time. In 1988-89, Bill managed the construction and installation of 5 Northwest Coast big houses and 1 longhouse for the Grand Hall of the new Canadian Museum of Civilization, as well as other projects at the UBC First Nations House of Learning and Expo 92 in Seville, Spain. Bill also consulted on the Nuyumbali Society Museum at Cape Mudge, the Umista Cultural Center at Alert Bay, and the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center at Whistler. You will hear much more about Bill's involvement with organizations and communities during this event. To start off our presentations, we are going to hear from MOA's director, Anthony Shelton, Haida artist Jim Hart, and Andreas Laforet. Jim Hart has been a friend to Bill and MOA since 1980, when he was working with Bill Reid on The Raven and the First Men. Andreas Laforet was the curator at the Canadian Museum of Civilization for many years.
I am Anthony Shelton. I'm Director of the Museum of Anthropology and Professor of Art History at the University of British Columbia. I've known Bill for 16 years since I arrived here. He was a person who took me up and down the coast. He introduced me to communities. We went to Haida Gwaii 2 or 3 times, to the Nass Valley, to Kitimat, and to many other places. He also introduced me to artists, to Dempsey and Jim, who are speaking today. It was Bill who really taught me the importance of diplomacy, of working with First Nation peoples, of sharing culture. So I really appreciated Bill. I really miss Bill. He was somebody who had great integrity. He was passionate in that very quiet way of his. He was devoted. He was devoted to First Nation communities, to the artists, to making works accessible to them, to training and encouraging the next generation of artists. And he was a man, he was very much a family man. He often would tell me about the achievements that his daughters had accomplished, and his wife. He was intensely proud of his family. He was, I think, proud of his heritage. He was proud and happy with himself in terms of who he was. For the museum, he was extraordinary. He was one of the most extraordinary and knowledgeable curators I've ever met in my life. He benefited us immensely. Before I came here, we had some initial funding for the Partnership of Peoples project, a really ambitious initiative that increased the size of the museum by 50%, involved a lot of First Nation communities, really revolutionized the building and MOA and our capacity to do the things that we do today. After our previous director left, there was a 2-year interim period before I was appointed. And Bill was one, I think, of very few people who really kept that alive. He believed in that project passionately. When I came here, he talked to me of its importance. He gave me the strength and the appreciation to continue that work. Even after he'd retired, he still worked passionately for the museum. I would say not for the museum, but for Northwest communities and for Northwest Coast art and its preservation. He was instrumental in working to bring the Dogon collection here. He was passionate about how these collections had a role to play on the Northwest Coast, how our artists could be re-engaged, our community members could be re-engaged in these in these treasures. He worked passionately for that. He was an incredibly decent man. He's somebody who I think was a role model, is a role model. His memory is a role model for all of us. He was self-effacing, humble. I think a lot of the things that he accomplished he would not kind of readily admit to, but his accomplishments were great. He was a giant. He was one of the most important people in the history of MOA, and I miss him almost every day. He would often wait outside my office if I was in a meeting, and he would come in with some photograph of a new piece that he'd discovered, and he would explain to me all about it and its relationship to other pieces. There was that quiet enthusiasm that infused him. We will all miss him tremendously.
Billy McLennan. Bill McLennan was an amazing man I met in 1980 when I started working for Bill Reid at the Museum of Anthropology on the Raven and the First Men. Through time, I started knowing Bill a little bit more and what he was involved in. He got hired as a photographer and that out there at the museum. And then he slowly expanded into all kinds of other areas. And it became a huge working mechanism of the Museum of Anthropology. And through that, he kept me involved in different projects, and he got me to do a pole for them, reconstructed an old pole, and from Masset. And it was a wonderful time, it was the first pole that we raised by hand with ropes, lots of people, they didn't believe in it, they had, in the trees they had something hidden and all this. And anyway, it was fun times, scary times for me, and Bill was such a man that he knew how to talk to me. He knew how to talk to me right from the start, and calm me down, whatever, because the city was new, and I was quite nervous about everything. And I learned how to handle the city through time, and driving was a huge thing. And then, but Bill, I used to go and visit him quite often in his little office. They make a nice big museum, but the office spaces were quite small. It was quite funny how they treated the guys that worked in the museum. And he had the best garbage in the world. I used to go in there and check through his garbage because he'd be doing projects and throwing out photos and stuff of old pieces, old Haida pieces, you know, things like this. And I'd collect them all up and bring them home because they're wonderful things for me. And so I used to enjoy his garbage. And he got me involved in a few other projects. We did the Canadian Museum of Civilization in those days. We did the Haida House for that. That was a wonderful project, and Bill headed it all up. And he'd come up and visit, and he was a fine gentleman. He was an amazing man. He was fair to everybody. I tested him 2 or 3 times to see if he's leaned which way with the different tribes, and no, he was fair to everybody. And that's what I really liked about him, because I could talk to him straight up, and he'd tell me the truth on what he thought and everything else, and I banked on that in my life. And he helped us, you know, my wife and I, through, you know, just being there and working with the Museum of Anthropology on different projects. Dr. Ames was involved in those days, and they were tutoring me through my life in a way that I didn't understand at the time. And then as I got older, I realized what they were doing for me. And I appreciate that from both of those fellas for helping me out and making me straight and narrow and true to my cause in a sense of what I do. I do artwork, and Bill was a big part of all that. And we discuss this and that, discuss ideas, discuss his involvement in the works, you know, in the art world. And he was studying Northwest Coast art all the time, and he had ideas, and he's putting things together, and it's just wonderful. And he was an amazing man. And I'm so happy that he was there in my life. And you should have seen the stride he used to have walking down the hallways of the Museum of Anthropology. I'd have to be going like heck to keep up. And he was a small, you call it vertically challenged, because he wasn't really that small, you know, not short, but he wasn't that tall either. But he had this gait, that stride. It was just so amazing. You had to. My hair would be shooting straight back trying to keep up to him. He was amazing, man. So it was wonderful to know the guy, and I'm so sad that he's passed on. And to me, it's passed on way too early in life. And he was doing such amazing work in this world, and he was a champion for the natives and all up and down the coast. And he helped out so many people, so many tribes, and got us into studying our pieces and helped out with all that. And whenever I wanted to do some research in the art world and our stuff and Haida stuff, he was right there. He'd be there, he'd let me know where pieces were in private collections or museums. So I just valued that time with him. Every time I got together with him, I valued that. Because we'd have fun, we'd joke with each other, have some fun. And he was always joking with me. Anyway, I'm so sad that he's gone. I can't believe it that he's left us. He's in a good place now, though, I'm sure. And we'll join him soon enough. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andreas Laforet, and today I'm speaking from Peterborough, Ontario. I've known Bill McLennan since the 1970s, and over the years, he and Sharon and all of their family have been wonderful friends to me and to my son, Jonathan. In the 1980s, Bill took on the project of coordinating the construction of 6 houses for the Grand Hall of Canadian Museum of Civilization, 6 First Nations houses. And in order to do that, he brought together 6 groups of carvers and artists, 1 for each of the regions represented by the houses. He arranged for those carvers who might not have all of the traditional tools that they needed to make them before the project started. And he worked with carvers who were working with old technology. The planks for the Coast Salish House were split with mauls and adzes. And new technology, the large planks for the new Chawnuth Hill House were specially milled. Some adaptive technology. Doug Cranmer, who worked on the Kwakwaka'wakw House, had what he called a magic fluter that he used to finish the beams for that house. The people who led the teams were Joe Becker, Hudson Webster and Ron Hamilton, Doug Cranmer, Glenn Tallio, Jim Hart, and Terry Starr. And there were 45 people in all who worked on that project and came from British Columbia to do it. The houses were built in BC in 3 different regions. They were disassembled, shipped back east, and reassembled in a very cold, drafty, half-finished cement building on the banks of the Ottawa River in March of 1989. And through that process, which had its own challenges, because the building wasn't finished, and there were, apart from other workmen working on other areas, the only other living things in the building were a family of cats that had moved into the second floor. Bill worked to solve the problems. One of the roof beams turned out to be a foot short. We needed a new log. And he worked very sensitively, methodically, and very patiently. He was wonderful to work with. He had a kind of insightful practicality that underlay everything he did, not only in that project, but in others as well. And he was able to make long-established techniques and technology work with innovative technology and new ideas. And somehow he was always able to make all of these things work together. The houses are still standing in the Grand Hall 30 years later, and they're a tribute to him and to the carvers and artists who built them. And he was, when I remember that project, I remember his endless creativity, his huge knowledge, and his endless generosity. He went too soon, and I really miss him.
Hello, friends and guests. My name's Karen Duffek. I'm Curator of Contemporary Visual Arts in Pacific Northwest at the Museum of Anthropology. I'm happy to be hosting this event with Moya to honor Bill, our friend, mentor, and colleague. Bill had a lot of laugh lines. He had frown lines too, but the laugh lines were deeper. They framed a pair of eyes that were at the heart of what he brought to the study and appreciation of Northwest Coast art. Bill was a really visual person. He had the ability, the gift even, to see and look deeply. That's what led him to the contributions he made to seeing, really seeing Northwest Coast art, especially the painting. Bill could look at 200 different painted compositions from old bentwood boxes, chests, and box drums, and notice and remember the details and combinations of their forms, the nuances that were clues to the hand of an individual artist, or that helped to define a style from a particular region on the coast. His commitment was to share his insights and to use his skills in photography to help everyone see beneath the patina of age that obscures so many of the old painted works, and to uncover what lay out of sight for most. I was lucky to have worked with Bill for many years, and one of our major projects was the exhibit and book, The Transforming Image, Painted Art of Northwest Coast First Nations, that was published 20 years ago already. That project took us about 7 years. Research, writing, working with artists who helped reveal those paintings from the past. After we finally submitted the manuscript, the UBC Press editor wanted to suggest some changes to the preface that Bill had written, where he explained how the image recovery project started. Bill had described how every day he'd walk by a great old Hiltzook painted chest displayed on the ramp leading down into the Great Hall. He wondered why he was always drawn to it. He noticed that its painted sides had a dynamic quality. The composition seemed to be full of life. He wrote in the preface, "This chest continues to stimulate my mind whenever I stop to appreciate its masterfully painted composition." The book's editor wanted to change that wording. Rather than the phrase, stimulate my mind, she suggested that Bill write, this chest continues to arouse my interest. Speaking of Bill's laugh lines, I always will remember him guffawing in response and muttering, yeah, I do love the art, but not quite that much. Since his so-called retirement, Bill kept on working with his infrared photos of paintings, which he had assembled, probably 1,000. He focused on some of his favorites, including ones that hadn't made it into the book and were more complex to reconstruct. He used Photoshop on his computer at home to study and paint out the forms on top of the photograph. He shared that work in his teaching at the Frida Deasing School of Northwest Coast Art, and with any interested Indigenous artists and community members. With great pride, he'd sometimes send me his latest ones in emails or post a special piece on Facebook. Just before I introduce our next group of speakers, I want to read a few words that Bill wrote to accompany these paintings that he was continuing to explore. After Bill passed away, I began talking with his daughters to see if we could fulfill his wish to assemble the work he had been doing in the last year of his life, and which he had really hoped to put together into a coil-bound book for the artist to use. Among the works in progress, we found a page where Bill had written down ideas that he wanted to put in that book to provoke some thought. Bill usually wasn't much of a writer, but here, with only a little bit of rearranging by me, his constant editor, we see that there was a poet lurking inside him. Here's what he wrote as he's speaking to the great old painted boxes themselves. What you say I will never know, but your dynamic forms enthrall me. These boxes were painted by a painter, not designed by a designer. Ragged and worn, the lines can be found if you look. Not fillers and forms, but a conversation about history and evolution. Not a label on a box, but a painting to animate and give life to a structural container. Maybe one village, maybe a different village, maybe not. Does it matter who you inspire in the new generation? They come back to you to learn. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our second group of speakers, all of whom have learned with and from Bill. First, we'll hear from a group of artists at the Frida Deasing School of Northwest Coast Art up in Terrace, who put together a beautiful tribute. Longtime friends Dempsey Bob, Stan Bevan, Ken McNeil, are all founders and senior teachers at the school. They're joined by 3 artists of the next generation who were students at the school and now are also instructors: Stephanie Anderson, Nathan Wilson, and Nakkita Trimble. Then we'll hear from Brenda Crabtree and Cathryn Wilson of the BC Achievement Foundation Awards program, in which Bill was a valued jury member, advisor, and visionary in developing ways to support contemporary artists. And finally, in this group of speakers, we'll hear from the emerging Nuxalk artist, Danica Nakarala, who joins us from Bella Coola.
Bill was a great man. His contribution to the revival of our art form is immeasurable, and his contribution to our school too. He loved and respected our culture and our art. And like when we started, he was one of the first people to support the artists and show us our old pieces, our masterpieces in the museums. And I want to thank his family for sharing him with us all these years. Because what Bill did was very, very important. And we call his book the Bible of our school. because of the great artworks that are in there. And I just want to thank them. And I want to thank Bill too for his friendship through all these years and support of artists. Bill was a very humble man. He never wanted any credit. But the way he conducted his work and himself with great respect and dignity, he will always be remembered by our people. We're going to miss him.
We can't thank you enough, Bill. You've really enhanced the program. You've been a friend. You've been a teacher. You've shared your life's work, and we are definitely going to miss you.
He's such an incredible person to know, and I've really admired him for everything he has done for our people, and I know that with everything he's done, it's going to go on for generations, and I'm glad to have known him, and I'm glad to have call him my friend.
When you hear that Bill's going to come to the school, it's kind of like everybody starts to get excited and everybody starts looking forward to it. And when he actually gets in here, it's like the studio's quiet and we're all just ready to listen and hear what he has to share. And like every time that he came, it was something new that he was personally excited about. And that was the real gift, to see those personal moments from him. Yeah. The work that Bill's done is going to be handed down from generation to generation. With my generation, I'm handing it down to my students. And with my students, they're going to hand it down to their children and the people that they teach. So this is the life that he put into his work will always be, how do I say this? Bill's lifetime of work is going to have a cascading effect on our community for the rest of our lives and for the lives of our children and so forth.
You know, he was a part of our lives, and he was a part of everybody's life, and he was definitely a shining light that we could always look up to. So thank you. That's what I really would want to say to him. You know, I got a lot of insight from Bill about my family, and you know, that's stuff, that's knowledge that's gonna stick with me forever. You know, every time he came to the class, you know, he always had something new to say and new stories to talk about, and stuff that he always had stories that, you know, not everybody knew. You know, he was a part of our family. He was a part of, you know, the school. He was a family member of the school, and you know, he was a very, very valuable person.
Bill is definitely a key figure in the revitalization. His project, Transforming Image, the book that they put together, is groundbreaking. He used technology that he knew how to use, and he brought those old boxes back to life, and he gave it back. He gave it back to the community. And that's what we all study today. We all Northwest Coast artists study the Transforming Image. Bill really understood Indigenous culture. And the work and the research that he didn't do it to advance his own career. He did it to give back, and that's an Indigenous methodology. And he really understood that, and he operated that way, and it's just so evident in all the work that he's done. Once shared in class that he wanted to be an artist, and he was really, really interested in Northwest Coast art, and because he didn't feel like it was his place to do form line work, he dedicated his time to helping other artists achieve that work. And so I think it was his understanding of how to support the growth of something that he really thought was worth growing and bringing back.
So my name is Bill McLennan. I'm a curator emeritus from UBC from the Museum of Anthropology. So my research has been on old Northwest Coast painting and finding ways to share it and use it for inspiration for the students and help them get involved with the old Northwest Coast art that is spread around the world. You know, it exists in 300 museums and private collections, and so bringing it back so it can be modernized and created by modern First Nations. People know that the tradition of the First Nations of North America, it wasn't a written language, so the visual art was extremely important in passing on information. I mean, it was much more than art. It was history, it was family relations, it was all put into paintings and carvings and regalia.
Hi, my name is Brenda Crabtree. My Halkanilam name is Kiathalamut, and I'm the Director of Aboriginal Programs and Special Advisor to the President on Indigenous Initiatives at Emily Carr University of Art and Design. I'm speaking today from the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, where we are grateful to live, work, and create.
Thank you, Brenda. My name is Cathryn Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of the BC Achievement Foundation. We're the presenting organization for the Fulmer Award in First Nations Art. And today we want to speak with you about Bill McLennan.
It's our absolute honor to be part of this film celebrating our dear friend and colleague, Bill McLennan. Bill and I have had many connections over the years through our passion and commitment to elevating, promoting, and perpetuating First Nations art in BC. Today I'm sharing with you Bill's remarkable legacy and imprint on the work of the BC Achievement Foundation and its First Nations Award program. The Fulmer Award in First Nations Art has been honoring excellence in First Nations art throughout the province for 14 years. And for 13 of those years, Bill and I sat together on each of the juries, tasked with selecting the annual awardees. We served as jury members for the first decade and then moved to support the jury process as advisors. Bill was the resource, the oracle, the teacher that we all looked to at these jury meetings for his sage advice and expertise. His knowledge was vast, and he shared it willingly in his humble, straightforward, and often humorous manner. This year, as we participated in the 2020 jury meeting, the enormous space that he left at the table was felt by all, and he was terribly missed. Yet, he still gave the jury pause as it considered how Bill might have viewed some of the discussions, and that reflection helped inform our decisions. Thank you, Bill. In November of 2019, BC Achievement hosted an artist talk with past First Nations art awardees, alumni Phil Gray, Casey Hall, and Bill. Moderator Connie Watts directed questions at each of the participants, and I would like to share Bill's response as it is emblematic of his dedication to the work he did.
So I'm a bit obsessive. I was just back in Montreal and Toronto for some meetings with a foundation that helps support MOA sometimes. And so on the last day, I got up at 5 in the morning and caught the train to Toronto, and then the train from Union Station up to the ROM, and photographed in infrared pieces I had missed 30 years ago. And so Northwest Coast art is spread all around the world, right? So you don't, unfortunately, yet go back to the communities. There's more and more cultural centers, but just tracking these things down and finding ways where other artists can find them is so important. And I don't know, that's what I think about all the time. Where can I find more? The family that my daughter's associated with in Bella Coola gave me a photograph taken maybe about 1900 of Louis', great-great-grandfather as a little boy, and his grandparents have a big blanket over their knee and a blanket behind them. And they simply gave me the picture and said, find those, right? And so actually I had found a partial picture of one of them, but I don't know if it's in a private collection or a museum, so I'm obsessed at finding those blankets for that family.
In 2016, BC Achievement was proud to establish the Crabtree McLennan Emerging Artist Award to honor the remarkable contributions of both Brenda and Bill had made to the program. The award is an affirmation of their efforts as they each support the future of First Nations art in this province and beyond. With Bill's passing, this program and its award has become a permanent legacy. Bill always had a story to tell, which taught us how dedicated he was to his calling, how carefully he listened to others, and what a constant he was in the work he took on. His love for his family permeated all he did, and he eagerly shared his joy over his children and grandchildren with all of us, making him even more of a great human being. Thank you, Bill. On behalf of BC Achievement, we are grateful for all you did to establish this important First Nations art program, and you have ensured that your teachings will continue to direct and inspire all of us as we showcase artistic excellence, truth, knowledge, and history.
Thank you, Bill, for your kindness and for sharing your knowledge during your time on this earthly planet. We send you love on the next part of your journey. We miss you dearly.
Hi, my name is Danica Nakarella. I am a New Hulk artist. I first met Bill McLennan in 2014 when I was attending the Frida Deasing School of Northwest Coast Art in Terrace, BC. Bill would come and he would share these images and knowledge that he gained from visiting museums and collections throughout the world. And he was always willing to share everything he knew, and I think that was one of the things that made him so unique, is that he was really devoted to our art and preserving it, and the photos that he was able to take with his infrared and place into this book, The Transforming Image, with Cathryn. These photos really changed the way we know our artwork now. A lot of us artists consider this to be our Bible. Mine is very well loved, and all of these renditions and all of these photos that Bill was able to capture with the infrared and really change what we thought was just a box to be something that held so much more. These are our rules, and they really make our art what they are. And so it was always a pleasure to talk with Bill and be able to just sit in his presence. And he was just so kind and so nice. And in 2017, when I was given the Crabtree McLennan Emerging Artists Award, I was truly honored. I was not expecting it. Bill has truly revolutionized our art in preserving and just creating so much resources for us that it is unbelievable. And to be able to have known him personally, professionally, it is really an honor. And to be able to work with his daughter, Laura, is just, it's amazing. And so I'm truly, truly honored to be able to speak with you today to honor Bill McLennan.
One thing that Bill did not like was being mistaken for an anthropologist. And one thing he loved was the absolutely horrible instant coffee that he would regularly drink. How do those two things relate? I have no idea. but building relationships with artists, collectors, First Nations community members, benefactors, researchers, students, and bringing cultural belongings and artworks back into connection with people. Those were core to his being. In the past 5 years, one of two main projects for Bill, myself, and Musqueam curator Jordan Wilson was working together to curate the inaugural exhibit of MOA's new Ellsworth McConnell Gallery of Northwest Coast Masterworks, which opened in 2017. We all learned a lot together as we worked with about 30 Indigenous artists and community members to look at historical Northwest Coast art in a different light, as the exhibit's called. And then we began work on a book that expanded on that idea, to see these great old artworks as more than art, as still connected in multiple ways to Indigenous people today, beyond the walls of the museum. It was Bill's last major project, and we worked with 80 Indigenous participants. Jordan and I completed the manuscript this summer, sadly without Bill's final input, for the book that will be dedicated to him. It was relationships that made those projects and many others possible. And in this next group of speakers, we'll hear about more relationships that were so meaningful to Bill, in which he shared his knowledge with others who were also committed to supporting vital research and access to collections. We'll hear first from Bill's friend, the philanthropist and collector Michael O'Dane, followed by Anne Murray of the YVR Art Foundation, on whose board Bill brought leadership and inspiration. After that, Susan Avon of the Doggone Foundation shares stories of Bill gaining friendship and trust from the Montreal collector and philanthropist Ellsworth McConnell. And finally, museum curator and scholar Jordan Wilson reflects on getting to know the real Bill.
I am Michael O'Dane. I'm speaking to you today from Vancouver about the passing of my good friend Bill McLennan, a man who taught me so much about the art of the original peoples of the Northwest Coast. What Bill did was help me over the years to identify the various historic artifacts that came my way, and I realized that he did this by consulting his many friends among the living artists across the province. We had the opportunity to connect many times through his work at the Museum of Anthropology. I was particularly grateful for Bill's help in identifying the various historic masks that formed an important part of the permanent collection of the O'Dane Art Museum in Whistler just before it opened in 2016. He toured many areas of the province, interviewing artists like Dempsey Bob, Norman Tate, Bill Dick, and many others, so that I could better understand the cultural background of the First Nations in British Columbia. This was possible because I think it's fair to say that Bill had more friends throughout the province of British Columbia than anyone that I have ever known, and I can tell you that I felt very honored to be amongst them. Bill's knowledge and the expertise that he shared with his colleagues was invaluable, as well as his kindness to us, my wife and I, and so many others, countless others in this province will not soon be forgotten.
My name is Anne Murray. and I'm deeply honored to have been asked to say a few words about Bill. I got to know Bill during my time as an executive with the Vancouver Airport Authority, but also when both of us were working on the YVR Art Foundation Board of Directors. Bill always was so impressive. He had an incredible way with people, where he applied also his profession and skills with respect, with integrity, and with purpose. In the early 1990s, when I first started at YVR, all of the new terminal construction projects were going to include First Nations art. And Bill was integral to what has become an essential element of YVR's reputation, a much-loved sense of place built on showcasing the best of British Columbia's First Nation art and artists. Well, Bill was involved in many projects, and he worked closely at the time with Frank O'Neill and Clive Grout. There's really three that I want to highlight. YVR operates in the heart of Musqueam traditional territory. And Bill worked very closely and respectfully with Musqueam community members to ensure that their arts, culture, and heritage was showcased in the International Terminal building that opened in 1996. The Musqueam Welcome Area includes large weavings, a carved spindle whorl, and welcome figures. What I like most about the Musqueam Welcome Area is that you're welcome to the traditional territory prior to the Canadian border. And Bill's relationship with Bill Reid is well known. The two Bills worked closely together on the installation of the Spirit of Haida Gwaii, the Jade Canoe, which is in the heart of the terminal complex. And the other installation that really showcased Bill's efforts is in the Pacific Passage, Hektu, the Thunderbird, a monumental piece by Connie Watts. Through all of this, Bill really ensured a connection between the viewer and the piece of art, and making sure that they were well integrated, so millions of people passing through YVR had an incredible experience. Where I got to know Bill the best, though, was when we were both volunteer directors on the Art Foundation board. Bill was a board member from 2010 to 2019. Well, Bill made many contributions to the foundation. The lasting legacy, and I think the one element he would be most proud of, is the Masterpiece Study Program. Susan Jackson, the foundation's current executive director, really credits Bill with the inspiration for that entire program. In 2012, Bill was talking a lot about the need for BC contemporary First Nations artists to be able to interact with and experience and study the works of their ancestors. However, those works were no longer in the communities, having been removed over the past several hundred years. And instead, they're in collections elsewhere in Canada and around the world. So Bill proposed a travel grant program where we would, as the Art Foundation, help support the travel needs of these artists. In 2014, we introduced the Masterpiece Study Program and provided grants for artists to study at 3 different BC museums. And the program keeps growing. As of 2020, we have 10 museum partners across Canada, the US, the UK, and Europe. And over 40 artists have now experienced their ancestors' work as a result of these programs. Bill was an inspiration whose work demonstrated reconciliation in action. Bill's presence left us stronger and wiser, and his legacy will live on through the people and places he touched.
Bill was not only a valued member of the board of the Doggone Foundation, but he's also the reason that Elspeth McConnell's quite remarkable collection of Northwest Coast art and artifacts came back to British Columbia and was placed at the MOA. Simply put, without Bill, that wouldn't have happened. And the Elspeth McConnell Gallery of Northwest Coast Masterworks wouldn't have been built. So let me tell you the story. Bill recounts his first encounter with Elspeth. He picked up the phone one day and this gruff voice asked him, "Where's the catalog?" He searched his memory trying to remember a catalog that he might have borrowed and not returned, and came up blank, so asked who was speaking and what catalog they were talking about. And it was Elspeth looking for a catalog on Charles Edenshaw. And when Bill explained that there wasn't one, she told him to make one and hung up the phone. So fast-tracking to 2011, when Paul Marchand, Elspeth's longtime lawyer and advisor, was arranging for her to move out of her house and move into senior living, he found out that she had amassed over 30-some-odd years a pretty important collection of Northwest Coast art and artifacts, contemporary and archaic. And she was looking for an institution that she could gift them to. So, having married into a prominent philanthropic Montreal family, the first obvious idea was the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, not that it was her favorite choice. They met with people at the museum and were told that they really weren't into oceanic art and refused the collection. So Paul asked who else she knew. And Elspeth thought that he should reach out to Bill. So Paul traveled west and met with Bill. And from that first encounter, he saw Bill was keen. He was keen to work with Paul and Elspeth. And Paul remembers Bill as being kind, extremely knowledgeable, interested, and he believed that Elspeth might have something worthwhile to give to the MOA. So in moving Elspeth out of her home, a rough inventory of her art was made on spreadsheets, and I culled anything that was Northwest Coast and sent a list to Bill. There was around 300 items at that time. And Bill made a selection that he wanted to see, and he traveled to Montreal to see them. And I remember walking into the storage space because Elspeth's art was placed in storage because she was in a much smaller apartment at the time in a senior residence. And Elspeth was so excited to be reunited with her pieces. She had a real connection with a lot of her work. But I could also see that Bill was pretty excited at what he was seeing. And he and Elspeth immediately got into discussions about the different pieces and how they were made and who they were made by and the communities they came from. It was wonderful. But in looking at the pieces, Bill realized that there was a piece that was missing from the selection he'd made, and it was an identification numbering snafu that the storage people rectified, found the piece, and they carried it into the room. And it was a large piece. And they put it down on a table and unwrapped it. And there was a collective gasp. And Bill exclaimed, "That's where that is." And it was a blanket box that Bill had seen in photographs of the front of a house, and he'd never been able to track it down. And I think that was true of a lot of Elspeth's collection, pieces that they'd never been able to track down. So during that visit, Bill was asked to become a member of the small board of the Doggone Foundation. And he worked to convince Elspeth to gift her collection to the MOA and to build an exhibition space to showcase the pieces. And Elspeth had made it clear that there would be no cherry picking. It was all or nothing, and that didn't seem to be a problem for Bill. And of course, from that date until her death, her collection grew, and she relied on Bill for advice on what were good additions to her collection. So the province of British Columbia and the MOA received the gift largely because of Bill's personality and knowledge. On a private note, I'd see Bill twice a year, spring and fall for our meetings, and we'd exchange emails in between. In our one-on-one time, which was usually in the car driving to the airport or back to his hotel, he'd talk about his family with love and pride. In our email exchange, he often tacked on photographs of his youngest granddaughter, Emmy, who lives in Bella Coola. He was so proud of his family and everything that they did. On learning of Bill's death, a fellow member of the board of the Doggone Foundation, Dr. Alan Schneiderman, made these remarks to me Bill was an extraordinary man, so learned he could be gentle, so strong he could be quiet. He spoke with a smile, and when the smile reached his lips, it also reached his eyes. Bill, I know your spirit is in good company.
Hi everyone, my name is Jordan Wilson. I'm a member of the Musqueam First Nation, and I'm a curator and a PhD student. I've worked at the Museum of Anthropology on and off for the last 10 years or so, beginning in my undergrad and still to this day. But actually for the majority of this time I didn't really know Bill. He was always a presence at the museum, of course, both before and after his retirement. But there's something about his gruff exterior that I found a bit intimidating. I think maybe because of his bluntness and his stubbornness, particularly in staff meetings, that, I always just kind of found him a bit intimidating. But that all changed when I had the pleasure of working with him and Karen Duffek, co-curating the exhibition In a Different Light, reflecting on Northwest Coast art. And, within the span of a few weeks, I realized how kind and gentle and caring of a man that he was. We interviewed many different people for that project. Among them was the Tsimshan weaver Willie White, who at some point referred to Bill as Grandpa. And after that, I couldn't help but use that nickname for him as well in a very endearing and affectionate way. That said, he still, in our meetings and conversations was, very forthright and spoke his mind. And that's something that I really appreciated about Bill. I was walking in our neighborhood the other day thinking about this video and what to say about Bill, and it kind of dawned on me, or I remembered how proud of being from East Vancouver Bill was. And I thought about that, thinking about how he was self-taught and humble, and his working class background was very clear in how he carried himself and how he conducted his work. He never, carried himself as being above or better than anyone. He was always humble and hardworking. And I think that's something that, he carried with him until he passed. He was always so curious. After he retired, he was always wanting to learn more. And when we worked together, he was always genuinely curious about my own perspectives and my own experiences. So I think, he was always wanting to learn more and teaching himself, and then most importantly, sharing what he learned with others. I think, one of the things that he would get excited about the most was emerging Indigenous artists from the Northwest Coast and wanting to share his research and his findings and collections all around the world. He wanted to share that with established artists, but especially with emerging artists. He really wanted to support the young artists of today. I think, another memory that stands out to me and really kind of captures who Bill was, one time I asked him if he had ever picked up a carving knife, if he had ever attempted to recreate the art that he was so genuinely passionate about, and he said something to the effect that it wouldn't feel right to him. And I think to me that really conveys how respectful he was of our Indigenous cultures and art forms here on the coast. That he loved it and appreciated it, but he knew what the respectful boundaries were in that work that he did. So those are the memories I wanted to share, just thinking about his laugh, his smile, but I think above all I'll keep in mind his values and his ethics and his genuine excitement about Northwest Coast art and today's emerging artists and supporting their work. So I hope that I can follow in those footsteps. And thank you for inviting me to share some words with you today.
Today we've heard so many people speak of what an amazing person Bill was and how his work and legacy will live on. We've also heard how much Bill loved his family and how proud he was of Sharon, his daughters Michelle, Heather, and Laura, their partners, and his beloved grandchildren. Many of us have seen the girls grow up, go on great adventures, and come back to settle down, and we consider them part of our extended family. As Bill's longtime friend, David Jensen, wrote to us recently, in the early years when Bill was producing sound and light shows for rock bands, I wondered if he was a bit of a rebel. Now I think this rebellious nature allowed him to become such an effective and influential curator and enabled him to do so much and touch so many hearts in such a short time. He was always evaluating, questioning, challenging assumptions and authority. He made sure he was not only doing things well, but also doing the right thing. He identified those things that mattered to him, and over time, gave those things all the love and attention they deserved without any need for recognition. MOA has wonderful staff and volunteers who are dedicated and committed to the work we do here. Many of us have worked together for many years and shared many work and life highs and lows. I often refer to us as the MOA family, and we claim Bill as brother, uncle, mentor, and friend. This next set of videos is from 2 MOA volunteer associates and 3 staff, and we give the last words to the McLennan family.
My name is Jean Lubin, and I've been a volunteer at MOA, first in education and then as a gallery guide for 22 years. And during that time, I came to have the greatest admiration and respect for Bill, for the tremendous depth of his knowledge, and based on his own extensive research and his personal contacts with so many members of Indigenous communities throughout British Columbia, including the late Bill Reid. I learned of his innovative research into the Transforming Image program when I worked with Jill Baird and developing a high school program based on this. And Bill and Karen Duffek's book, The Transforming Image, was our Bible for that project. I would never miss an opportunity to listen to a talk or a tour that Bill gave at MOA, because then I could share the insights and the information that he gave us with visitors on my own tours. Visitors never failed to be fascinated by an exhibit in the O'Brien Gallery, which featured Bill's work on recovering images from old houseboards and boxes. But I think what I appreciated most about Bill, and I know I speak for all the volunteers in saying this, was his incredible generosity in taking the time always to share his knowledge and to answer our questions, no matter how trivial. And every time that he passed us in the halls of MOA, he always had a friendly smile and a friendly greeting. His presence will be sorely missed by all of us at MOA. So thank you, Bill, for all you did.
My name's Barbara Baker, and I'm a volunteer here at MOA. And like so many volunteers at MOA, I never miss an opportunity to take a tour with Bill. His information and his background is so vast, his knowledge, that there's always something new to learn. It just is amazing. But my earliest memory of Bill was in the summer of 2010. I was a newly recruited volunteer. I hadn't started my training, and I happened to attend a presentation of The Transforming Image led by Bill. I was completely captivated. I knew I wanted to learn to teach this program because it was an examination of how to recover these wonderful, colorful, beautiful images on what appeared to be old, dirty, dark, damaged items. So, imagine my disappointment when I found out that as a new person, until I had completed the first 3 programs of the education program, I wasn't eligible. But I was determined, so I approached Maureen Richardson to see if there was any way I could train concurrently. Maureen, being so supportive, said she would see what she could do. And to my delight, she made it happen. Since then, I have presented the transforming image many, many times to high school students and even to adults. And whether it's art classes or social studies or history or First Nations education, the students are always intrigued and interested, because it is almost magical the way the scientific techniques reveal the images that lead to a greater appreciation of First Nations art and culture, which is what you're seeing behind me here on these house boards with the raked light revealing the design. When school students see this, they just gasp. And all this is because Bill traveled all over the world, taking photographs of hundreds and hundreds of objects and developing a process to reveal the hidden designs and to make visible what appeared to be invisible. And so I know I speak for all the volunteers when I say, thank you, Bill, thank you.
I remember always hearing Bill before he showed up. He was either whistling a tune I knew or he was just making his own little diddly up. He would come down around the corner, downstairs or into a room, kind of rough voice, but kind voice. He'd go, "Hey, room," followed by a statement or a question. For 35 years, he called me by my last name. I never figured out why. It was informal, well, collegial. Maybe it was a clan thing. I don't know, but it always made me smile. I started my internship at MOA in Bill's office at a drafting table, laying out publications and print runs. In those days, it was all PMT and photos that needed to get waxed into place. I learned a lot about picas, leading, and margins. Bill was very generous with his time and opened up the world of photography to me. He provided us endless hours in the photographic studio showing different lighting techniques and hookups, and allowed many hours in the darkroom, opening up a world of magical imaging and experimentation. Bill didn't shy away from new technology at all. When graphic computers became accessible, and especially the flatbed scanner, he traded in the darkroom and launched into a digital world. I remember one time working with him on a new program, Photoshop 2.0. He wanted to take archival photographs of Northwest Coast houses, fronts, and see if he could change the perspective. The images were parallax, dividing off into a vanishing point. And he wanted to flatten the image to better understand the composition and see if some proportional measurements could be figured out. There were 2 times of the year that you could find Bill in the back hallway with his Hasselblad strapped around his neck, and he was heading out the back door on a mission. In late fall, it would be to go out at lunch foraging in the forest for mushrooms. Bill had the most amazing collection of photographs of wild mushrooms, just beautiful. The other time was after the first snowfall at MOA. "It's all about the light," he'd say as he ran outside to get the photo of this year's Christmas card or postcard. The Scots have a saying, "Long may your lum reek," translating, "Long may your chimney smoke." I like to think it also means, "Long may your memories remain." Thank you, Bill, for the time you gave me, and thank you for the time you gave MOA. Blessings.
When I think of Bill McLennan, I think of walking around the Museum of Anthropology, his eyes twinkling as he's pointed out amazing details of the amazing works from the Northwest Coast. He could point at little joints, little paintbrush strokes, and bring a sense of wonder and awe. I also liked him because he was really open to finding ways to communicate these complex and beautiful ideas to grade 4 kids and grade 2 kids. Just as important to him that elementary school kids would be able to get a sense of wonder as Indigenous artists. Both communities really meant something to him. He'll also be missed as a friend. I still, as I think about it, I still use the tablecloth and the napkins that he was with me in Cecil when in Thailand when we bought them from the Queen's Palace Museum. Rest in peace, my friend.
I'm Alyssa Cherry. I manage the library and archives at MOA. I never actually got to work with Bill. I started at MOA soon after he retired. Yet he always seemed to be around, popping in to scan some of his photos or to locate something in the archives. Because he was such a wealth of information and institutional history, we often had a list of Ask Bill questions going. He was always happy, or he at least pretended to be, to share his knowledge, providing a backstory or additional context, and he usually did this with a smile on his face that made it seem like he was not just talking about work. It was very clear that these things really mattered and were important to him. I'm standing in front of Bill's records. We have 73 boxes in here, and we also have almost 150 gigabytes of electronic records, including thousands of his incredible photographs, which we are prioritizing for digitization. Bill's records are becoming some of our most frequently used archival materials, which demonstrates how important and broad his work at MOA was. If you're missing Bill, come visit the MOA archives. A small part of his legacy lives on right here.
Hi everybody, my name is Heather and I'm Bill's middle daughter. I just wanted to start by saying thank you to everyone that put this together. Moya, Karen, Susan, and Jerry. Thank you so much for all the time and effort you put into this. And thank you so much for everyone that is speaking here today and who's joined us to celebrate the life of my dad. And I just wrote a little poem about my dad that I'd like to share. You were sitting on a tiny chair with your head down, asleep on my little table. I asked my sister for a glass of milk, and for no reason in particular, slowly poured it over your head. This was a story you liked to remind me of. At the beach, we looked for baby crabs under the rocks, and you showed me how to put the rocks back carefully so the babies could return safely. Your coffee, black like soot, thick like cooling lava, unfixable with any amount of milk. The museum at night. I'm trying to keep up with you. Everything is alive and looking at me. I feel lucky to be here with you. A secret forest that you planted with saplings somewhere in UBC. You forgot to tell me where to find it. Now I think of you when I hear a raven looking up at a cedar tree, when I look at my children, ovoid, form line, bagpipes, rhubarb, airport pickups, dog babysitter. I feel happy to put on your old socks and go for a walk in the woods. And that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Grandpa, for teaching me origami. Now I'm really into it, and you basically got me started with origami.
I miss you, Grandpa.
We thank everyone for all your words of support. Bill was the most loving and thoughtful husband. Family was first to him. It's our 50th wedding anniversary this year. He's a father of 3 girls and 6 grandchildren. He was the coolest dad and grandpa. Everyone said he had so much gray hair because he had 3 girls. He took them to swimming and gymnastics and piano. He taught them to drive, so he had nerves of steel to do that. He taught them how to ski and snowboard. He surfed and snorkeled with them in Hawaii. He went on all the rides with them in Disneyland. He took them on shopping sprees to the Aritzia warehouse. He taught them the love of gardening. He drove them and teammates to basketball and volleyball games. He volunteered at the school. He sang silly songs to them. We love you and miss you. Thanks, everyone.
I miss Grandpa.
We were born before the wind.
also younger than the sun. And the bonnie boat was one. Yeah, we sailed into the mystery. Hark now, hear the sailors cry. Smell the sea and feel the sky. Let your soul and spirit fly into the mystery. When that foghorn blows, know I will be coming home. When that foghorn whistle blows, I wanna hear it. I don't have to feel it. I wanna rock the gypsy soul, just like way back in the day. Yeah, together we will fold into the mistake. Coming home. When that foghorn blows, I wanna hear it. Don't have to fear it. I wanna rock your gypsy song, sit down way back in the day ago. Into the mistake.
My name is Michelle and I am Bill's eldest daughter. We just wanted to thank you for putting this virtual memorial together in honor of my father. A few things about my dad. He was of Scottish-Irish ancestry, born and raised in East Vancouver, and grew up in an often poor working class family. In his early 20s, he met my mom, Sharon LaRock, who is of Cree Métis descent with family originating from the Treaty 6 area in Alberta. Together they raised myself and 2 younger sisters with the values to always work hard and stay humble. These last years, my dad found happiness being around his grandkids and various family pets. He spent some of his free time driving my girls and their teams to and from practices and sports tournaments right up until the end. Something else he did right up until the end was work on books, presentations, committees, and projects. He knew he had access to knowledge and information that others may not, and was working hard to ensure that that knowledge and information through art was accessible to and in the hands of its original and rightful owners. In closing, we just wanted to mention my sister's mom and I are in the process of coordinating with the Parks Board to place a memorial bench for my late father at Trout Lake, at the south end near the beach, facing the mountains. We will let everyone know when the bench is in place so that when you are in the neighborhood, you can stop by, have a seat, and a visit for quiet reflection. Thanks.
Before we close, there are 2 additional people who have asked to speak about Bill. Jackie Geisen studied at MOA and worked with Bill in the 1990s. Ruth Phillips was director of MOA from 1997 to 2002. I would first like to invite Jackie to say a few words.
Thank you, Moya, and all of the folks here, and Sharon and family. As Moya has said, my name's Jackie Geisen, and it's my privilege to say a few words about Bill, who I came to know, I think, around 1980, when I first started at UBC. I was a very young, very naive, and very idealistic UBC student who had the incredible good fortune of becoming Bill's student, working with him for a number of years and a friendship for many years after. For a young student, shy and unsure of myself, Bill's friendship and stewardship was transformative. Whether he was purposefully doing it or it was just instinctive, Bill provided me with powerful gifts of learning and opportunity at a time when it made a difference. Bill helped me, and as you can hear from the speakers this afternoon, he helped me learn to see. We shared a huge passion for photography, and you might call me Bill's field assistant. I was the one who schlepped this gigantic 4x5 camera across the Pacific Northwest through Alaska, Alberta, British Columbia, Washington State, with a big crate load of negatives and the cloak that went over your head to take the photographs, all part of the image recovery project. I learned to tune my eye through the camera, like Bill, watching for what the artists were trying to say. Bill would wait for my return to MOA with all that unexposed film, dying to see what it was going to reveal. His passion for the work of the extraordinary artists was over the top. What did he say? Obsessive. And it was inspiring. Bill also gave the gift of opportunity. Again, with cameras in tow, Bill sent myself and Karen to Haida Gwaii for Bill Reed's launch of the Lutas canoe. Little did he know, or I know, that this would be the beginning of a decade of learning from the Haida aunties, uncles, and artists some pretty important stuff. What it was to be human, to be Indigenous, to be Haida, to be white. That growth stimulated me to take ownership of who I was and all the strengths and weaknesses that come with that. It was Bill's commitment to people and the artists that I remember so clearly. You've heard that he used art, design, and technology to communicate. And Bill and I shared the attribute of not being very big fans of writing. But as another example, he put his trust in myself and another student, Mila Kodik, to take over his office while he was on secondment to Expo 86. He charged us with communicating MOA's work through flyers, brochures, and museum notes. What did we know of editing, graphic design, producing all of these materials? Well, I can tell you by the end of it, we knew a lot. And that knowledge and those skills and that trust helped me through my career with nonprofits and arts organizations. Finally, Bill gave the gift of impact. He set an example where it counted, cutting through hierarchies and the bullshit, going straight to the core of good people and good work. At a time when I was struggling with activism roles as a young, disgruntled art history student, Bill set a boundary and he asked me to work within it, to help make an impact by building up, not tearing down. I can't really call Bill my mentor. He didn't work in the traditional sense of a mentor, but he was my museum god uncle. And I know my career leading arts groups and nonprofits was all the better for having known Bill. I'm thinking of you, Sharon, and the girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie, for your memories of Bill. I would now like to invite Ruth Phillips to speak.
Hello, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Ottawa, and I'm tremendously moved from all that I've heard, by all that I've heard from everyone. Thanks to all for sharing your memories and your insights. I didn't really know Bill until I came to MOA, and I remember feeling a certain amount of confusion as to what exactly his role was there. I knew he was one of the designers. He was trained in graphic design and photography. But as everyone has made so clear, he was the most extraordinary resource for so many levels of information and knowledge and insight. And I finally came to understand that there was a unifying principle, which again has been mentioned by so many people, that organized all the different things he did. And that was the interest, the impact that any given project of his or anyone else's would have on Northwest Coast artists. He put their interests first, and the many different things that he did were organized so that they would profit the artists and help their work be understood. And that ranged from the research projects, which involved such innovation and creativity, to one thing that hasn't been mentioned by anyone yet, which was the shop products that he worked on. And I when I think about him, these four memories, sort of moments come to mind. And one was discussions with him about how to get, I think it was ceramics produced in British Columbia, designed by the artists he worked with, the Northwest Coast artists he worked with. And when it really didn't make much sense to have things done locally, but rather to contract them to China, all his loyalties came into play there. Another moment, much more poignant, was when Bill Reed died, and I needed to talk to him about something and found him weeping in the loading zone at the far back of the basement level.
There's Robert.
A kind of level of emotion that he didn't show too often. I also very much remember the launch of the Transforming Image and the tremendous impact that that work has had on the art history of the Northwest Coast. We suffer in doing this work from the fact that we have so little documentation for so many important periods of the development of the art. You have to be innovative, you have to be creative to figure out how things evolved and were worked with by artists over time. And Bill's photography, his raking light, his infrared, were examples of how he brought all of his capabilities together in the service of this central goal of supporting the arts in their future. I'd like to just read an email I sent to him shortly before he died. I think it may have been too late for him to have heard it, and I'm sad for that, but I'm going to say it to him now, wherever he is. During my years at MOA, I relied on your knowledge and wisdom in so many ways. You never failed to teach and advise me with grace, tact, and insight then and after. I have never met anyone whose commitment to the interests of the artists whose works you have studied and loved was paired in the way it was in you with gentleness, modesty, creativity, and generosity. I cherish the memories of your remarkable exhibitions, all informed by elegant graphics and photography. They continue to enrich my appreciation and understanding of Northwest Coast art, as it does that of so many other people. The many gifts you have given me will remain an ongoing inspiration. They inhabit so many things I consult and live with, from the books on my shelf to the etched glass vase on my table. I send you love and wish you and your family strength. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. So nice to see you again and to hear your reflections on Bill. And we have a last minute request from Robert Davidson, Haida artist Robert Davidson, who would also like to speak. So, Robert.
Sorry to interrupt, Robert. It looks like you still might be on mute.
Okay, how's that?
That's better, thank you.
Okay, good. I was stumbling anyway. Thank you, Hoa Kilsly, Bill McLennan. I want to thank you for the incredible work that you have uncovered through your photography.
It's all Haida on screen and Helptic in the chat.
Oh, he's frozen now. Yeah.
Try again. Take number 3. It was very exciting when Bill showed up with the bracelet designs all in flat, and it was exciting to see the whole design in one view, and also the way he the excitement that he had in unraveling through his photography the many boxes that are housed in museum storage. Thank you, Bill, for all that. And it also expedited our relearning curve from the old masters. We are forever indebted to your contribution to our recovery through the art. Hoa Kilsly.
Thank you, Robert. Nice to see you. Okay, thank you very much for joining us today to celebrate and honor Bill McLennan. Thank you to all the speakers and to the McLennan family for your wonderful videos and memories of Bill. The McLennan family have requested that donations in memory of Bill can be made to the Downtown Eastside Women's Center and to the Bill McLennan Master Study Award at the Frida Deasing School of Art, Coast Mountain College in Terrace, BC. We will be posting a recording of this tribute to Bill on MOA's YouTube channel soon. So please tell people who weren't able to join us today to check MOA's website for details. I want to thank Susan Jackson from the YVR Art Foundation and Jerry Lawson, Oral History and Language Lab Manager at MOA, for working with Karen and me to organize this event, and to Chris Leung and his colleagues at UBC AV Services for their technical support. I also want to thank our bagpiper, Joseph McDonald, for piping us in and out of the event. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.